Hey, Peter.
Yes.
Do you have Mamba mentality?
Ooh, yes. Now you're talking my language.
Do you have Barry mentality?
Ooh, I think so.
Do you have Hans mentality?
Barely.
I sure hope not. I'm Adam Menace.
And I'm Peter Martin.
And you're listening to the You'll Hear It podcast.
Music advice coming at you.
Coming at you today, we're sponsored by Open Studio. Go to openstudiojazz.com for all your jazz lesson needs. It's my vocal warm-up for the episode,
this
honestly.
This is my physical warm-up for this episode. It always makes me think of...
yeah. The
used car
thing.
Manchester.
Yeah. So we have three different icons.
Yes.
Kobe with Mamba mentality.
That's right.
Barry mentality from legend.
I barely caught that reference.
Barry Harris.
Yeah.
Which we're going to be really talking about today. We're taking a couple SpeakPipes today. And then, of course, Hans Groener mentality.
That's right.
Which I don't recommend. Shout out to Hans and apologies, Hans. But not really going to work with those other two mentalities.
That's okay.
Yeah.
There's a place for everything, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. So today we're taking a couple of SpeakPipes. The first one
We're back on the SpeakPipes. I'm excited about that.
We like to check in every so often. Yeah.
Yeah.
We got a couple of good ones. The first one is from and this is a question we get in some form or another.
Yes.
Every so often. Let's
yes.
check out Om.
Hi guys. So I've just been doing a lot of shedding this summer, and I realized that whenever I use the bebop scale and I try to make bebop lines in my solos, I can't get my lines to stop sounding like scales. Any tips?
First of all, congrats on the shedding. It sounds like you're quite young, and this should be the summer of the shed for anybody here.
Summer of the shed.
Yeah.
I like that.
Use
summer
your summer.
Of shed.
Sometimes we have a little bit.
Is that like Summer of Sam? Because that didn't work out too well.
No, let's not invoke the serial killers. You went straight there. No, the summer of the shed is the summer of practicing. So going to the woodshed is practicing.
So we have Summer of Shed, Summer of Sam,
He's gonna bring
Summer
it
of
back.
Love. That's a good one.
That is a good.
That was
take that
69,
one.
right?
67, I believe.
67.
Was the Summer of Love. Yeah.
Gotcha.
69 was Woodstock.
Oh, Woodstock.
All that stuff,
well, loving too as well.
So is trying to use the bebop scale.
Yes.
And lo and behold, it doesn't sound like bebop.
What a tangly web we weave for ourselves when we delve into the bebop scale. Okay, so this is an area of, I think, great controversy, but also great possibility and, fun for exploration, the bebop scale. And I always think about, is there sort of a perfect way to approach this? Not in terms of, theoretically, and we're going to talk a little bit about the different attitudes, but I do think there is maybe, not a perfect time, but there's a sort of perfect range in which, learning this scale, and don't worry if you've already learned it. You don't worry about going back in time or anything. But you're never too late with learning a scale like this. I think this is one of those ones that doesn't need to be part of your core technical connection with the instrument. Now I'm a little bit selfishly saying this because I didn't know what the scale was until I was well into using it and understanding it. Not understanding it, but applying it. Right. I just feel like it's just one of those scales that you can overthink a little bit too much, right?
Yeah.
Which is what we're going to do right now.
Well, no. It's actually a scale that is really not a thing within bebop musicians themselves.
Yeah.
As Barry Harris will describe it later in his life.
Yeah.
It is the
He's chafed at the name and the concept, right?
Yes, as do many people. Because it really isn't what the players that were playing bebop were thinking about at the time. So before we get too deep into it, let's talk about what it is. Traditionally, the bebop
you just said it
scale,
wasn't a thing.
No, but what people call it, right? So I'm not actually sure when people called it. Oh, no, it is that one teacher in Indiana, I think, started calling it. Someone put in the comments who came up with the bebop scale at first. But bebop musicians don't really talk about it like this, as Barry Harris will describe, and I'll talk about Barry's concept later. But it's basically the dominant bebop scale, or just the bebop scale, is putting a half step between the root and the dominant seven. Right? And that puts all the strong tones on the beat when you're playing eighth notes. Then there's something else that people call the major bebop scale, where you put a half step between the fifth and the sixth. right? So that is what Barry Harris calls the sixth diminished, and that's really to build chords. It is not a melodic device. And
it's a mnemonic device.
It's no. But the interesting thing is what you're really doing here is you're putting a half step between scale tones so that strong scale notes end up on the beat. And then by the end of Barry Harris's teaching career, he had developed a whole system that really you do hear more often in actual Charlie Parker solos and Bud Powell solos than any of these, bebop scale or major bebop scale.
Right. And also, real quick, shout out David Baker.
David Baker.
That's
who it was. Yeah, who's a great teacher.
Fantastic teacher. Fantastic guy.
It's kind of a limiting concept to have just the bebop scale with just the half step between the first and the seventh degree. Because as Barry Harris says, you can actually do this in a few different ways. Where would you like to go from here, Peter? Because I could either teach the Barry's chromatic concept, which I think is really valuable, or we can talk a little bit more about the use of just these traditional David Baker style bebop scales.
Yeah, well, let's just talk about how they can kind of successfully be used, maybe.
Okay.
Even just sort of our concepts. And then I think that the question really about not sounding like scales when you're learning the bebop scales and you're starting to apply it, I think it's really potentially a pitfall that we can maybe help with a little bit for any scales.
Yeah.
And just for your playing, especially kind of bebop playing. Because I think what people maybe get caught up in is like, oh, the bebop scale will give me that bebop sound. I get a lot of people being like, oh, teach me that hip, the way that you play those lines with that hip bebop sound.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be like stuffy or snooty and be like, oh, that's not a bebop sound. I am clearly a post-bebop modernist or whatever. And as we know, like the names don't really apply. So I try to get more into like, well, what are they looking for? Because I want to help them with what it is.
Well, Ohm says, why doesn't it sound like bebop? Or it doesn't sound like bebop when I practice the scales. It sounds like I'm just running scales. I think the easiest way to get out of this, Ohm, and I know you agree with this, is add some jazz arpeggios to the mix.
Right. But within the same phrase, maybe.
Exactly.
Right?
So instead of just, maybe something like starting off with, that's like on C7, right?
Yeah.
Starting off with 3, 7, 9, and then
coming down.
Like adding these adding those things
too.
Yeah, so we're adding these chord structures to our scale work, and that's not, if you do that, you're just going to sound like you're, eventually you just start like you're alternating that. It's not real bebop language either, but it's a start. You're getting more into the territory of something that Charlie Parker would actually play.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I think that you can actually, especially when you're practicing, and remember, when we're practicing, it doesn't have to sound great. It just has to lead to you sounding great.
That's right.
On the gig. Like that's the whole point of it,
One more thing on this. If you really want to sound like you're playing bebop, why not just transcribe some Bud Powell and Charlie Parker?
Right.
Out the gate. Learn what they played over these tunes.
And you will. I mean, this is the thing. It's never like one answer to this stuff. It's not like bebop scale is valid. Bebop scale is not valid. Barry Harris's approach to bebop scale is valid. It's not, because you're going to see elements of this bebop scale in Charlie Parker and Thelonious Monk, Bud Powell for sure. But then you get to kind of reverse engineer what they're doing. But I think the bigger thing is like, how do you get that bebop attitude, that bebop swagger, that kind of sound? And so much of it is rhythmic and articulatory.
100%.
And so you can actually use that.
Also, the blues is a big part of it.
And the blues, exactly. But if you just take like what you just did, and you're like, well, that sounds like the bebop scale. Well, then you're literally playing it starting on beat 1, running down the bebop scale over eighth notes with no skips, with no omissions or anything, no breaks or anything. But that could be a good thing. It's like, how can you make that sound, at some different tempos? 2, 3. This is hard, right? You know, how could you give it a little bit of swagger? Because then this sounds lame, doesn't it? I'm trying though, man.
Yeah, but this is not something that you would hear Bud Powell or someone like that play.
No, but
there's no shape to it.
But then you start to look at the other elements, like just going up that simple.
Yeah.
You did it the other way around. The arpeggio first. You could do it either way. But it's like, how do you start to give it that feel? And then that's starting to sound a little better. You speed it up, but you're getting that sound, that swag, everything when you're doing it slower.
Listen, how you play is always more important than what you play.
Yeah.
And so that should be a consideration. That's another case for listening to a lot of great.
Right. But don't jump right to the end and be like, oh, I have to be able to play the way that Charlie Parker incorporated, Oh, I did a little bit of lick there. That was by accident.
Yeah.
But like, don't feel like you're gonna have to be able to do it like Charlie Parker. Use that as inspiration, but then restrict yourself a little bit to start to get that swag in there.
Yeah.
Because then when you add in, I'm gonna give just a couple of different ideas on how you can start to complicate the usage of this a little bit, but slowly. So if you've got, well, let's go up. Right, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4. How about starting on the upbeat? 1, 2, 3, 4. Boom, gang. So now you've got a little something different. Same thing. You're just running up the scale. Now we're gonna give it a break. Go back to the 1, 2, 3, 4. Just little things. Give a little bit of a break in there, and then there's so many different ways just to do that.
So good.
But you're still concentrating on like really locking things in. You have to kind of delay your gratification as a listener and really as a player in doing this, because it's hard. It's hard to make that sound good, but that's what's going to kind of force you into learning that stuff. If you take a Charlie Parker line and you transcribe it and learn to play just like he did, that's great. And that's a valuable part of it.
Yep.
But you also have to be able to take these basic elements, especially when you start going through different keys, because you're really starting to build things up. If you just took, right?
What are you coming down on that?
Just coming down the jazz arpeggio. Up the bebop scale, and then go up to the ninth. And then you can add that with the offset. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? Then you start to see how these different things lay. Maybe a little bit of
yeah.
It's the same notes, but like, how can you start to make it more interesting? But do it slowly as you go.
Yeah.
So that your ear acclimates, so that you start to really get those details.
And I highly recommend checking out some of Chris Park's material here on Open Studio if you haven't already. He's got a great YouTube channel of his own, but he does some amazing work here at Open Studio Pro, and he has released one course, the second course on his way, about all of this stuff. All of the bebop elements that you're talking about here, he goes through them all very detailed. So it's not just like going down. You could also do pivots.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff.
Did you just put a beret on? Because you're playing bebop, my brother.
All that stuff, it kind of has that instant sound. It gets you there once you understand.
Yeah, because that's what I've realized. Like, and it's no fault for anyone for being like, how do you get that bebop sound? I used to chafe at that question.
Yeah.
But now I'm like, no, I get what it is. It's all those things put together.
Yeah.
But it's like when you practice, it's okay to just have them. In fact, it's preferable to just have them simple, one at a time.
Totally.
You're not going to become corny because you're running up and down scales.
The brilliant thing about Barry Harris, why people respond so well to him, is he took this thing that is actually seems difficult, and he systematized it in a way that actually makes you sound like that.
Right.
It's kind of like the Fuchs book with counterpoint, and you sound like Haydn once you do that book. It's like
going. It's pronounced Fuchs, but I'm not sure.
Excellent. I was trying to avoid that. Thank you. But if you go through sort of Chris Parks's interpretation of Barry's teachings, you get a very similar sound. It's very cool. Let me just show you real quick Barry's chromatic rules.
I know those, but show them for the people.
Because I feel like this could help you too. This, to me, was an eye-opener of how...
And let me just say too, and you correct me if I'm wrong here, but before you show this is not exclusionary of the bebop scale.
No.
Even though, you can take different elements. Sometimes even certain teachers will say, well, you shouldn't do that. Put things together however you want. No, it's all good as long as you understand it and practice it for your benefit. None of these are going to necessarily clash with each other, even if the so-called rules do.
So the bebop scale and the major bebop scale, the reason why they work and why David Baker taught them is because they do put the the scale tones on strong beats.
Right.
But Barry's whole thesis was, bebop players were doing that with not just those notes. Yeah. It was actually any note. Right. You could put a chord tone, a semitone between, and put and if you look at the canon of music, it was more varied than just this particular instance, right?
Yeah.
Or this.
Right.
So Barry's rules of chromatic scales are between, if you have a C major scale, you can put a chromatic tone between any whole step. So between C and D, between D and E. Mm-hmm. Now we have a half step, right, between E and F. So what do? We go a scale tone above that F up to G, and then back to F. So that becomes like the note between E and F is the scale tone above G, the C major scale tone. And then we're back on F. Now there's a whole half step between F and G, half step between G and A, half step between A and B. Now there's just B and C, right? No half step between, scale tone above, D. So you get this.
Yep.
And you can do it opposite on the way down. There's no half step between C and B, so we jump up to D, right? There's a half step between B and A. There's a half step between A and G. Half step between G and F. No half step between F and G, so up to G as the note in between. Now we're E, half step between there, half step between there. So that on the way down. This puts all of the notes of C major scale right on the B.
Right.
You could do the same thing with dominant.
That's right.
Right, jump up before the B flat. On the way down.
Yeah.
Right? So that is sort of Barry's rule of the chromatic scale. Again, Chris Parks has some amazing stuff here at Open Studio on that and on his own YouTube channel.
Yeah, shout out Chris Parks and shout out Open Studio Pro and his much heralded and well-received weekly lessons over there where he really integrates these concepts in a way that's so interesting and
so
organic.
Cool. He's beyond popular with our Open Studio Pro members. But the cool thing about this is you don't have to play every single one. Like you can just pick your spot, right? Like you can pick where you put them in, and then you get all of this sound. Then you get natural enclosures. You get all of this stuff. It's like many things of Barry's teachings. It's completely genius and can really open you up to some more and closer sounds to the original, I think, than just the major bebop or just the dominant bebop.
Absolutely. So you laid it out so well, and I think that it brings to mind and is a great reminder for us all that there's multiple ways to use these concepts to explain them, especially when you get to the sort of theoretical explanation of them. But for instance, like, so the way that you explain that, and then because of that break between the third and fourth, and for non-pianists and for pianists, but non-pianists, you can think about when you're playing the key of C. That's the sort of visualization is the lack of black keys there.
Easy to see.
But the application of it a lot of times, and you'll see this with bebop players, so like going to F major, but
totally
that kind of thing, and maybe even, like a little extra surrounding of that. Like that's how you actually hear it. And just because you're explaining it and understanding it first in the key of C major, that doesn't mean it can't be used over C7 going to an F major.
It's a similar thing with our trope.
Yeah.
What is that?
Bebop
right?
Scale.
In a C major, G, F sharp, F, and then we're jumping up. We're not jumping back up to G like Barry recommends, but up to A to put a note between the F and E. It's a similar concept.
Absolutely.
So one of many great concepts, that you can dive deep into on
and
the
like
whole.
Even if you just heard like the way Adam just like little thing, like the rhythmic thing of like how, like that's what I'm talking about, that swag, that attitude.
Articulation is key here too. One general rule to follow that isn't universal, but you can definitely hear, is it's a geographic rule. Whatever's on top gets naturally accented. So, so something like that. Whatever is on top of that melody gets accented, and you get that. It's not hard and fast, but if you do it, you can kind of get that.
It's a great
sound.
entry point for sure.
The sort of if you looked at the line on a sheet music, the top notes of the phrase are usually what are accented.
Right.
And you can hear that in a lot of players.
Yeah, and like a lot of times when I have gone through and sort of analyzed little phrases, I mean, not just bebop, but anything that was influenced by bebop, which is potentially any, kind of modern jazz up to today. It's such a big part of our vernacular, especially when you talk about articulation and like navigating lines. But where those top notes and those accents occur will often be some very interesting, explanation of the syncopation.
Totally.
Like when you look at that, going from downbeat to upbeat to, which of course we have so many different options, but the idea of there being variation, what you don't normally see is like an extended bebop line where the accented notes, be them on the top or otherwise, are all occurring on just the upbeats or just the downbeats. Yeah, that's when you get into a little bit of a cookie cutter kind of sound. Now, could you find Monk or Bud Powell or Burr doing that sometimes? Maybe, but
mostly it's like
more exceptional. Yeah, dude, big ass beret on.
But you even when you were, it's mimicking the human voice. We do this with our voice. You can hear it in my sing-songy podcast voice. I'm accenting things. The pitch that's highest is what I'm using to accent, right? And so it's mimicking.
Do I do that too? I don't know.
You just did, yeah.
I just did.
Do I do that too?
But the different.
Do I do that too?
That's the beautiful part about it is. Do I do that when I play the bebop scale?
Do I do that too? You really was like, do I do that? Do I do that too? You know, do I do that
Mono
too?
Neon, man. We got to get him to do a
bebop
whole
scale. Yeah.
Which was great.
That was super fun. We have one more question.
No, we're
here.
done, man.
That's it?
That's it. Well, no, we're not quite done yet.
No, we have one more.
We do want to remind you, if you have a question, please hit us up at you'llhearit.com. You can leave us a SpeakPipe. And as you can see, we sometimes answer them. We don't always answer them because some of them are questions we've gotten before. Sometimes, to be honest, we lose track and forget. And sometimes we have technical error and erase them. But otherwise, we do not want to diminish your diminished scale question.
Are they stopping at the stop sign today? That's all I'm worried about.
Okay, this is why I say we only want one, because I want to talk about this a little bit.
Blowing through the yield? What are we doing?
Okay, interesting thing happened.
Right turn on red?
We had a little bit. Shout out producer Caleb, and shout out producer Caleb Cam.
Oh, yeah.
There he is. And just a little note, you can't see the total how this is set up, but I can see producer Caleb. When you went in and started grooving on the bebop scale in time a little bit, producer Caleb with his socket sandal was tapping his foot in agreement with what you were playing.
Excellent.
So that's always a way that you know that a line is working. If a great musician is or anybody's tapping their foot is great. But anyway, shout out Caleb, producer Caleb, because we had a episode that came out a little later because we had some in the can because we had a holiday.
Yeah.
Shout out United States of America, July 4th.
Shout out cans in general.
Shout out Canada for Canada Day, which occurred a little bit before that.
Nice.
Right. Fun fact, producer Caleb has spent much of his life in Canada. Some of his life. Would we say much?
Not really anymore.
Okay. You said not anymore. Okay. Immigration problems? Should we not
talk.
be talking about this? Anyway, we said something that I totally forgot about, and we had some great things in the comments. Please continue the comments. We really appreciate the comments.
It's a gentleman's and ladies agreement.
Oh, that's right. We actually require that you like and subscribe.
Someone actually shortened it to G-L-A. G-A-L-A.
Gala.
Gala.
G-A-L-A.
G-A-L-A. Gentlemen
Gala,
and
it's gala.
Gala.
Why are you making that sound so awkward?
Gala.
There you go.
Don't forget about the gala.
Our friend from New Orleans / U City's name is Blank.
Isn't it Gala?
Davenport. Blank Davenport. What would you say?
Jeremy. Isn't it Gala?
I don't know.
Is it Gala?
Gala?
No, but is it
no, I'm just talking about the pronunciation.
Yeah, is it a long A? Is it a short A?
Gala. It's definitely not that. Gala. Gentlemen and ladies agreement. Give us a gala over at YouTube.
Or a gala.
Which is, all you're doing is you're just liking the channel. So we have our own bespoke YouTube channel called You'll Hear It.
Yep.
No, we need to announce this more because
people don't know.
Are we still recording?
Yeah.
If you're still listening, thank you.
No one's listening. If you are still listening, put gala.
That's
Gala in the as a comment.
And what the
go into the gala with you're getting dressed up. You can put your tux on for the gala.
We got to tell them what they're agreeing to though. All they're agreeing is to like the channel. No, to subscribe to the channel and like the video if you like it. Maybe leave a comment. That's optional. But we're asking for that because we are providing this podcast, all this information, and we listen to you. Somebody said we had a snarky comment in there recently that said
just what.
that said 6 minutes of nattering teenage girls making jokes and then finally getting to something important.
Why are you commenting, dude?
I'm out of here. And then they said, I'm out of here.
Just go. Why you go?
But look, you're welcome because now we're putting all the snattering teenagers at talk at the end.
Yeah.
See? So this is good.
Yeah. It reminds me, I forget whose joke it was, but it's like, it's comments
you
like that.
You can say whatever you want. Nobody's listening anymore.
I know. Comments like that are on the internet. It's like when you put those flyers up like in a town square that says like piano lessons and you pull the tab and it's like you see that and you're like, well, I don't want piano lessons.
Why,
like, you could
just
walk by
it. Right. Anyway, until next time.
You'll hear it.
I'm in Steamboat Springs, Colorado, currently.
I'm in Indianapolis.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Andrew, hi.
Because I feel inspired to play something else from your playing.
Okay, that's great.
I think using the metronome is a great tool, but it's not the only tool.
All of the answers are really in the music.
What does it mean to live in a groove, be in a groove?
Until next time, happy practicing.